Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is Real Talk powered by CMD, and I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths. I am truly so pleased to have Megan Bartlett with us today. It's an absolute honor during such a busy week for you with the launch of the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport. So welcome and huge congratulations on your launch week.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was just saying to you, before we started recording, I'm so excited to hear you talk about it, share with me and everybody else. So as we get started here, tell us what's your mission and what are you doing for your launch this week?
Yeah, thanks. So the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport is sort of founded on the belief that all sport experiences should be healing sport experiences for every kid everywhere. Yeah. And what we know is that too many of them aren't, right? We know that in some cases for kids, they're lucky enough to go into a sport experience and it's wonderful and they get so much out of it and they can sort of step away from whatever else is going on in their world. Yeah. But for a lot of kids, when they get there, there's still a lot of harm. There's harm that can still be done. And so we are working really hard, I think, and trying to put the science behind the idea that we can do better. We can make sure that all kids get great sport experiences. And so for this week, for our launch, we're trying to sort of get some eyeballs on that, right? Get as many people as we can to join hands and say, we should be paying more attention to this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, as I was thinking and preparing for our chat today, I was thinking about how there's probably never been a bigger time that there's a need for what you're doing. And I don't mean it that it hasn't happened before. I mean the trauma that's been associated with the space, but I think it's because people are so much at a time where we're hearing all these stories of it happening and people are so hungry for an answer, a solution. How do we fix this? And one of the things that's just intrigued me so much is that what you talk about, the healing and then the science behind it. I think that is really exciting to hear. And and we'll get to that in a minute because I would love for you to explain that. But before we do, Megan, I would love for you to share with us about your own evolution and how did you come to the seat you're in now? Because this moment and what you're doing, it surely didn't happen overnight. And you have been such a pioneer in the space of sport for good. And I did a little sleuthing on you and whether it was with Up to Us or with Nike, and on, the work you're doing. But, how did you get to this seat in this moment? Was it somehow related to you playing? I know you were the captain of the team when you were at Wesleyan University, but what's that journey been like?
Yeah, thanks. It did not happen overnight. And I'd like to say that it happened way more intentionally than it did. It sort of feels like in some ways I tripped and fell into this space. I originally found the Sport for Good space, which was in its infancy, really, when I was coming out of my graduate school program, because a friend was like, hey, can you come coach soccer at my summer camp? And I was like, I don't have a job. I can do that, right? I can do that. So I showed up at a summer camp in Dorchester in a neighborhood in Boston, and it was a soccer creative writing and service learning program. And I had been a soccer player my whole life, played in college, coached at the college level when I was in graduate school. And then all of a sudden I was coaching a bunch of kids who had never played before, were so pleased with themselves when they learned something new. And I could sort of see the impact that efficacy had for them, right? They didn't have a lot of other opportunities where they felt like they could see themselves get better at something and somebody was rooting for them and they could support each other on a team. So I ended up sticking around that program. The guy who invited me that day went off to become a principal and he said, would you like my job? Literally those words, which wow. I don't think, that doesn't happen often. Right? No. And I said, yeah, I would. So I went, that was my official start in the Sport for Good space at an organization called America Scores. Oh. And then I went and worked at the national office. And then I was lucky to be sort of in on the ground floor at Up to Us, where we ran an AmeriCorps program. So the first AmeriCorps program to put young people in jobs in sport for good, as coaches in communities where kids didn't have opportunities to play sport. And so my job there was to train the coaches and make sure they knew what they needed to know in order to do that work effectively. And so figuring out what that was for me, the sort of most special part of what we do, is really how do you break down what a coach needs to know in order to be effective with kids. And in this case, given a lot of the communities we were working in, it was, what do they need to know about kids? Full stop. What do they need to know about kids who also may have sort of more adversity in their lives than other kids? And so preparing them for that and preparing them to be as supportive and, positive in those roles was the sort of major part of my job there. And then I was there for 10 years, and about 5 years ago left, and was running a small consulting company for the last couple of years, and just decided it was time to do something a little bit bigger, try and get, what we're doing to more kids, to more coaches, and hope that, even parents and sort of more people who we think need to know about this can get involved.
Got it. So it was great because you added in there the evolution of the company too. So that's great. And you have a co-founder, right, who's heavy on the research side?
So we work in partnership with with an organization called the Neurosequential Network.
Okay.
Which is where a lot of the research comes from. So our partner, Dr. Bruce Perry, is a world-renowned child psychiatrist and child trauma specialist, who has spent 30 years sort of helping people understand what happens to young people when they experience adversity. And I've been sort of following his work for 15 years. And about when we started the last organization we coach, I reached out and said, I've been sort of sharing what you do with people, and I really think we could do more in the sports space. Wouldn't you like to, take time out of your busy schedule to do that? And he actually did. He said, what's powerful about what you're doing is that sport is uniquely suited to help kids heal, right? Everything we know about the brain tells us that relationships matter, that being active matters, and that experiencing sort of manageable patterns of stress, right? Learning new skills, trying new things in safe environments is what helps kids heal. So we should do that in sport.
Absolutely. It's funny too, because we hear so many people talk about the mind-body connection, and this takes it to a whole nother level, I think. And especially as you're talking about youth, right? Because so many of us experience sport in the first time during that time when these things come up. And so I love when you were talking about it, I was getting a little bit of chills about just the science behind it and, that connection. And I love that you're, this whole effort, it sounds like, with this launch of the company is really to maximize the impact. And so, super excited to hear this. When I was doing a little bit of my research into what you all are doing, I looked at the trauma-informed coaching element of it. And can you talk to us about that and how that is going to, you're thinking that is part of the pathway to realizing the vision of your impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of what we have sort of come to understand about a lot of young people's experience is that the adult makes all the difference, right? The adult that is helping facilitate that experience makes all the difference. And so making sure that coaches have more training in general, but in particular in this area of really understanding the impact that trauma can have on young people will be a sort of major lever when it comes to a young person's experience. And when we think about sort of how well coaches are trained in general, they tend to be, if they get any training at all, they tend to be trained in their sport, right? The X's and O's of their sport, which is fine. That's good. That's important. But there are so many other things that coaches encounter in terms of the way young people show up, right? In terms of their development, in terms of their social skills, in terms of their emotional well-being. All of those things make such a huge impact on whether or not a young person will be successful in their sport experience. And so we know that, based on all the sort of work that Dr. Perry has done over the last 30 years, what kind of impact adversity can have on the brain. And what that tends to look like in young people is behavior that doesn't sort of meet the expectations of the school system or a sport team or sort of wherever that young person shows up. They tend to exhibit behavior that an adult's like, I don't want to deal with that, right? And those young people often get excluded from opportunities like sports. And because our understanding of that is that it's a choice that the young person is making, instead of sort of the way their brain has been wired from adversity. And so even a fundamental understanding that that is what's going on can often really change the way an adult approaches a young person, right? If you think a young person is being explosive because they're trying to make you have a bad day, that's different than if you understand that they're being explosive because that's the way their brain's been wired based on the experiences they've had, and can be unwired and rewired again, right? And and that there's the hope that you can change those things. So when we find that when coaches understand that, first and foremost, they approach young people differently.
Right.
And they start to look for ways to include kids instead of look for ways to exclude kids or to get kids out of their way. And so that is a fundamental shift at the very beginning. And then if you start to understand what skills it takes to help young people not be explosive, to get the skills they need in order to not do that, then we find that for lots of coaches and young people, the entire relationship, the entire team dynamic changes.
Yeah, that's incredible. So as you're talking about, I'm just literally thinking about you're arming these coaches, you're putting tools in their toolbox that they now know how to operate differently. And I loved how you talked about they can just interact and approach the kids, the situation in a completely different way. So it's wildly different than the you're kick you out of practice or come back early and run sprints where, I think it really is, you're helping the coaches to be more effective. The more impact you have, the more impact they have. So am I right that the people who benefit most from Center for Healing and Justice through sport are the coaches and the youth, the kids who are playing sport?
That's a great question. I think to date, that's been true, right? We've spent a ton of time trying to build those tools for coaches, right? How do we help coaches do all the things that you just said? Approach young people differently, have a different understanding of sort of their role and the power that they can have in helping a young person heal. I think what we're hoping the center will be able to do is reach more folks involved, reach parents in a way that, and other sort of grown people in a young person's life who can start demanding better from their coaches, right? Can start saying, actually that screaming at my kid is not okay, right? We allow some behavior in youth sport that we wouldn't allow anywhere else. And,
true.
And so how can parents be advocating for their coaches to be trained? How can parents be advocating for their kids to have these experiences that we know can help them deal with? I think to your point earlier, now more than ever, right? Young people are showing up carrying sort of a heavier weight than they may have been before. And how can we make sure coaches are equipped to give kids what they need in that circumstance, and even really maximize these tools they have at their disposal.
Wow. And it's a national effort, right? Part of your launch this week is a national effort.
Yes. Yeah. Our physical home is Chicago, but we work all over the country in sort of coast to coast, where we have this incredible team of folks who have been working in this space for a long time. Our coaches themselves have had their coaching sort of transformed by the idea that they could be healing centered, that they're creating an environment and an opportunity for kids to heal that's unlike any other opportunity that they could be providing for them.
Got it. And you have some I think I was reading, you have some pretty powerhouse athletes who are standing strong with you, right? And helping to get the word out. So talk a little bit about, like, why do you think that they feel so impassioned about being a part of it? And how are they being involved?
Yeah, we've been lucky to have a lot of excitement from some sort of famous athletes who've wanted to use their platform for good for a long time, and really believe in the power that sport had to affect their own lives, and want more young people to have that opportunity, regardless of where they're born or regardless of what sort of they go through in the early parts of their lives. So I think part of that is just a paying it forward more or less from
I love that.
the athlete, right? And I also think, these are some of the athletes that we're lucky to talk to this week are, gold medalists and really powerhouse folks who just represent a whole group of former college athletes, former even, sort of elite athletes in unusual sports that maybe didn't, had a unusual pathway, but feel so passionately about what you can get from sport, either because they did or because they didn't. Right? We find a lot of folks who sort of blew out of sport is the way I think about it, because they were really abused in some, like physically or emotionally abused. And I think for a lot of those athletes, they really want to make sure that experience doesn't happen to kids, the way it did for them. And so we sort of see both sides of the coin there. People who say, I wouldn't be who I am if not for the power of sport, and people who say, I really want to make sure that this doesn't happen to somebody else.
Oh, wow. That's powerful. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, I will keep my eyes peeled to see those people in action. Yeah. So now that you are live, especially for this week, where and how can people get involved, whether it's to support or just get involved in some way? Can you give us an idea and point the listeners and me so we can follow and become involved?
Yeah, absolutely. The new website is chjs.org, and all of our sort of social and everything lives there. You can find everything there. Also, all of our launch week activities this week are virtual. So if you want to learn more, you can sort of see which among those activities sort of suits you. On Tuesday, we're announcing a big training initiative with our partners at the Laureate Sport for Good Foundation and the Junior MBA. On Wednesday, we're talking to Angela Hucles, who was a member of the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, Angela Ruggiero, who was the captain of the U.S. Women's Hockey Team, both gold medalists, and Blake Leeper, who's a Paralympian, who all of whom we're going to be talking about why parents should care about this, why parents should know more about how sport can be healing. Thursday, we're doing a sort of city tour, making sure that folks in the cities that we're working primarily in understand what's coming. And then Friday, we've got Dr. Perry and Ibtihaj Muhammad, who was an Olympic fencer and activist, and Matt Geschke, who works on the Nike social and community impact team, talking about why healing centered sport is so important and why we hope companies like Nike will keep investing in it.
Wow, incredible. Well, I'm so excited for you and really grateful for the work that you're doing to help the issues that are going on and to, have a better impact. And I'm sure that it will evolve over time, and you've got my eyes and my support. And lastly, before I let you go, if there's one thing that you want people who are seeing this or hearing to take away from it, what would that be?
I think for me, it's always this idea that sport, I think a lot of people think of sport as this nice to have. And I think what we're trying to do and what the neuroscience tells us we should be doing is to get more people to understand that it's a need to have. It's something that has so much potential to be that thing. Like we're looking for an answer. Sport has so much potential to be that answer if we do it the right way. It has so much potential to help us support the education system, to help us change the way we deal with young people in the juvenile justice system, to help us really think about physical health in a meaningful way if we do it right. And I think, so for me, it's this little switch between sport as this like extra recreational thing and sport is this essential thing that's going to help us help young people have a full and meaningful life.
Wow. Got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We'll let you go back to your busy week of activity. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you for all the support.